Hello, and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we have invited back Dr. Gabriel Cousens, who is the author of many books, and today is going to be speaking about a book that he actually wrote many years ago, but is in the process of being revised, upgraded, and renewed. That's Spiritual Nutrition and the Rainbow Diet. But this time he's going to be focusing on the beginning of it, called Spiritual Nutrition. Now, Meditation Magazine said of this book, it's the finest book ever written about the relationship of diet to spirituality and consciousness. So that's going to be the theme of today's interview. And Gabriel's been doing a lot of work on this, and he's going to be speaking to us rather directly about what he knows and what he has researched about this intimate and most interesting relationship between what we put in our bodies as food, how we even inhale, and our spiritual development. Hey, Gabriel.
Hey, Mitchell, it's great to be here.
Great to have you again. Really, it's great. And in New York, no less.
Yes.
Yeah. Although I love those mountains of Tucson, I tell you.
Yeah.
Keeps one very healthy and attuned, you know?
Yes, it's part of the spiritual nutrition.
Yeah, exactly. Eat that good air. So this has been sort of like a mainstay of your diet, if you will, for a long time. Yes. The relationship of consciousness and spirituality to diet. You've been known for your work in spirituality, your work in diet. You are basically considered a mystic by many, and you're kind of in a unique position to comment both as someone mystical as well as a scientist. And this we see more and more as a convergence happening between the spiritual world, the world of consciousness, and quantum physics, etc. So, what do you feel that we ought to know about this intimate and divine relationship?
One of the gifts I'm really offering to the world, and really the work we do at the Tree of Life Rejuvenation Center in Patagonia, Arizona, as you mentioned, is the gift of what we call whole person awakening. Different than many mystical approaches, we honor the body. In the original Kabbalistic teachings, it was said that the finite vessels were filled with the infinite light, but they couldn't hold the energy, and they broke.
Yeah.
And so part of what we're doing, part of my work, is helping people build such a strong vessel of light that it can hold the light.
Withstand that power.
That's right.
If you will.
And that is really, because part of my work as a Kundalini master is understanding if people aren't really ready, they can't hold the light of consciousness, and they can get out of balance. So my work is putting that all together. And first I want to lay out, in essence, from a more yogic point of view, the idea of the koshas, which include the physical body, but also the different levels of the subtle bodies or light bodies.
Mm-hmm.
The first kosha is Annamaya kosha, which is the physical body or the food body.
Yeah.
Okay, and
that's
where we're going to focus.
Mm-hmm.
The next level of light or reflection is the Kamamaya kosha, which is the desire body, but it's also about desire and resistance in our life, and also morality and so forth. And then Manomaya kosha, which is the mental body, which food also greatly affects. Okay, in fact, plays a very important role. Our thinking processes are very much affected by what we eat, and also, in my experience as the premier spiritual fasting clinic in the world, we find that when people apply the principles of spiritual fasting with green juices, the mind gets very clear and also very quiet. Many people who were not able to meditate before, in the middle of our 7-day spiritual fast cycle, where we're meditating twice a day, doing the yoga and so forth, are able to actually really start to meditate. Okay,
that's a big step.
That's a very big step, and I've been teaching this for since 1988. And so I have a lot of experience in it, and it just is a very consistent thing, is that when the mind gets clear of the toxins from the food and so forth, the bile toxins, we are able to go deeper into meditation.
It can really slow down and
Quiet.
quiet.
And they say yoga chitta virta nirodha. Yoga is stilling the virtues or activities of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first part of yoga. The second part of yoga is transcending the mind. Okay? So once we pass Manomaya Kosha, we go to Atika Manasa Kosha. Now what is that? That is the connection with nature, connection with beautiful music, the intuitive opening, the kind of opening that an Einstein has where he dreams the theories of relativity and then puts it into practice coming out of his dream. It's the opening of the more of the subtle bodies. And then we have Viveka.
Making them available, the
Right.
intelligence, information from the subtle bodies available to the other
Exactly.
levels, like the material.
And now see what you just outlined how this whole works. Okay? Because essentially what we have to do is each kosha is, in a sense, a layer of reflectivity.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a mirror that's dirty, it does not reflect the light. Right? And so what we do when we're doing this work is how to open up the layers so they reflect the light, so we become what we are already, light beings.
Mm-hmm.
But because we don't experience it, we don't operate that way. Okay. After that is the Viveka Manasa Kosha. Now what that is the Vairagya, which is non-attachment. Non-attachment does not mean detachment. This is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Detachment is kind of avoidance of life. Non-attachment means you're fully enmeshed in life as all expression of the divine. So in that process, you're not attached.
Mm-hmm.
Subtle way of understanding.
Oh, yes.
This is the way I teach it. So you're just experiencing it all as the divine play and the divine love.
It's actually a tantric position.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right tuned in.
Oh,
That's very good.
Paying attention.
And that is really a lot about what this is about.
Yes.
And then the other thing about the Viveka Manasa Kosha is we have the Vairagyas, which I just mentioned, and Vivekya. The ability to tell the difference between the eternal reality and the temporal reality. The great Essene teacher of righteousness once said, "Dost thou forsake the eternal, for that which dieth in an hour?" And it's being able to make the distinction. And the distinction is, the I am is who we are. I teach a course called the 0 Point. And the theme is essentially the personality is a case of mistaken identity. Okay, this is what we're talking about.
Right.
And then we go into Haranamasa Kosha, which is the merging into golden white light, as I experience it. And that is the I am awareness. Okay? And that's also what we call Sankalpa Samadhi, where you merge into the white light. And then Sankalpa Samadhi becomes self-realization when it's a consistent experience of who you are as the I am and not as body-mind complex.
Personality.
Right. And then that's the 6th level, and then the 7th level is what we call moksha, or God merging, where there are very few beings. So we have self-realization at the 6th level, Haranamasa Kosha, consistently. Now when you're consistently in a certain state of the Sankalpa Samadhi, it's called Sahaja Samadhi, where whether you're awake or asleep, you're in the light. I mean, literally in my sleep state, there's not much dreams. I do dream occasionally, but it's this white light all the time, and you wake in bliss all the time. So it's like an unbroken state, awake or sleep. Okay. But even beyond that is the final merging, and that's very, very rare. Maybe 5 people on the planet maybe are in that state. It's hard
At a time.
Yeah, it's hard to maintain that state. At the end of a 40-day fast, I was in it for 3 days. Usually the teaching is if after 3 days you end up leaving your body, and the message is you need to go back and teach this stuff.
Yeah, right.
Really, from the Kabbalistic point of view, which is my kind of origin roots, okay, even though my breakthroughs really happened in India to start with, into the Haranamaya Kosha and the Sankalpa Samadhi, or the self-realization level, is really one of we are all one soul. One planetary soul. Each group has their own soul groups, but we must all evolve together. And that's really why I'm here, and I know why you're here. So the whole planet needs to accelerate the consciousness. It's not just, okay, I got it, I'll see you later.
Exactly.
So
I'm out of here.
That's where I'm coming from, is that. So in that context, which you already alluded to, each layer needs to be white clean so it can reflect the light of the divine, of the Atma.
It's such a beautiful image.
It's a beautiful
It's a very
model.
workable image. You know.
And the work that I do with the tree is clearing, helping people with the courses and meditation and what we call Shakti Pot, and also in the Kabbalistic Ruach HaKodesh, the ultimate food, is the awakening of the spiritual energy to align all the koshas, all the spiritual bodies, and open up all the circuitry. Now in that context, we can talk about spiritual nutrition because we understand that we're improving all the bodies. And I want to say right from the beginning that although the food approach is primarily about the anima, anima kosha, the physical body, it affects the mind tremendously because we are what we think. And what we eat affects what we think. Okay? And it also even affects the Atika Manasa kosha because it opens up the third eye, it opens up our connection with nature. So one of the reasons we do the spiritual fasting out in nature is so we suddenly become very open to that. And a lot of people from New York love it because we have that lightning bolt intensity, but in the context of nature.
Right.
As you see on our brochure, we have a lightning bolt there.
Exactly.
An oasis for awakening. That's what we do. And so in the
and there in the mountains, man, you see that lightning like nobody's business. It's incredible. It's an entire canopy of lightning.
That's right.
And I was there, and I saw it and felt it.
Right. And that's really who we are.
Yeah.
It's like the lightning bolt oasis for awakening on every level of the koshas to do that. But I want to say this, so we don't want to limit the food in terms of where it's working on, because it does open us up to nature. A lot of people, particularly in the spiritual fast, which is more dramatic, really experience the connection with nature, because as you get silent, you begin to experience the overwhelming silence in nature. Right? And that's the great teacher. The overwhelming and silence in nature entrains us to our own inner silence.
Yeah.
So, and our own intuition opens up. And also the beautiful music of nature.
I connected, Gabriel, when I was at your place this past summer to the desert energy. It happened in a flash, actually, of just being quiet enough. And that wasn't a pun intended. I mean, in reality, it was just all of a sudden I was by the infrared sauna, that whole little area over there, where there are these great therapeutic modalities for you outside in nature. And all of a sudden, it was like the desert spirit came into it.
That's right.
And I went, oh my God, that's why they're here.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah.
And what I discovered was that live food was the most powerful living force. Now, when we eat food, we're biting into the living planet. And we're taking that consciousness with us. And so when it's live, we're getting all the life force of the planet. So one of the things that happens is, indeed, in India, we call it prana. Okay? And when you take live food, it has the most prana. Now, this is not my statement. I will tell you the ancient yogis and rishis, thousands of years ago, prior to Ayurvedic in a sense, their diet was live food. Now it's cooked food, I understand that. I'm talking prior. Why was that? Because when you increase the prana in the system with the food, you expand consciousness. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
The other thing about it is that in the nervous system, we have a subtle nervous system we call the Nadis. And for the Kundalini, we have the Sushumna, Ida, and Pangali, but there's 72,000 Nadis. When you eat the live food, you, in a sense, clean the nadis so that the spiritual energy can flow through more powerfully, in a sense, spiritualizing every aspect, including the chakra systems, as well as on the cellular level.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a third level here, and that's minerals. Now, live food is very high in minerals, particularly the diet that I recommend, which is more green-oriented. The minerals are, in a sense, every mineral is a frequency of light. There are 92 minerals. Most people are running about 30 minerals, or maybe even 12 minerals. Okay? So the more minerals we bring into the system, the more frequencies of light we bring in, the more open to probability. In a sense, we expand consciousness on the level of the manamasa kosha, the mind level. Okay? And so the more frequencies we bring in, the more potentiality we have, and the more potential we have to have the divine understanding. Now we go beyond that, in the sense we go beyond the mind to higher perceptions, which really come from meditation, which is another level of food, and come from the waking of the kundalini. But the level of the mind, we have either contracted minds. When you eat the junk food, what we're doing is giving up our birthright, which is the life force of the planet and all the frequencies that are available to us. This can be a very important thing.
Okay.
So, in a sense, people who are on the junk food diet have given up their birth, their connection to the birthright. Live food reestablishes that connection, increases the prana, increases the mineralization, which increases our potentiality of frequencies to take into our life. The more frequencies, the more open we are to probability, and therefore the more we are open to the divine experience. And these are the key things. These are the key principles of the relationship of spirituality to nutrition. And as we clean those first three koshas, and even going into Atika Manasaya kosha, the fifth kosha, fourth kosha, we begin to, in a sense, reflect the divine light that's coming through and begin to experience ourselves as light beings. The light's always coming through. But when the mind is kind of active, it absorbs the energy. So when we quiet the mind, diet helps quiet the mind, a proper diet, when we fast, which is a part of diet, the more quiet the mind gets, the more the light can pass through directly into our being, and we become, in a sense, our physical body reflects the light, and we begin to experience ourselves as true light beings. And that really puts it in context.
Definitely.
We become a total mirror for the light. Now, when we move from the physical body into the emotional bodies, the mental bodies, and so forth, it's like a narrow doorway that takes us into what I call the presence, the witness consciousness, and then to the divine presence, and then to the I am. And that's how the path opens. So through the physical body being a vehicle of light, it begins to move us up into the higher bodies, into the divine presence, into the I am awareness, which are the first stages of self-realization.
It's interesting, Gabriel, that we think of light bodies as like the energy body, as higher level bodies, but the whole idea really, as you're really so beautifully putting it, is for this dense physical body to be made a light body.
Yes.
By conducting the light through according to what you're laying out with the koshas. That's what's happening. The physical body is getting enlightened.
Exactly, and that's why I call it full body enlightenment or full body awakening. And that's really one of my gifts here. And that's my work. It's like, as a holistic physician, as a psychiatrist, as a mystic, I pull it all together.
Yeah, definitely.
And using the different traditions, yoga and Kabbalah and so forth.
Sure.
It's like a synthesis in a different way, and it's what's needed at this time.
By all means. Now, are there particular foods or nutrients that will help to open up the nadis and the third eye?
Yeah. Yes, there are. And what I would say most clearly is like spiritual fasting, which is with the green juices.
So it's a juice fast, green juice fast.
It's very powerful. What's happening is the juices, the vegetable kingdom, in a Kabbalistic teaching is considered closer to the primordial essence. Okay, they may not be as conscious, but what they are is they have that closeness to the primordial essence. So when we take it in, we're being filled with that primordial essence of the divine life. We share with them our consciousness, they share with this, and that ups our deeper experience as being light. So I would say that the greens and the grasses. Now, Rabbi Mahmoud in the 17th century used to go out and meditate with the grasses, and there was even
and the cows.
Yeah, but more of the grasses.
Yeah.
And the idea is that they even have a song to the grasses. So this is something that the Kabbalists knew hundreds of years ago about being in nature.
Yeah.
And so, are there secret foods? We can say yes, there's superfoods like the algae, particularly the blue-green algae, which really opens up the mind, opens up the tikka manasa kosha. More specifically, the heavier greens like spirulina, they're all high, very high light frequencies. The vegetables in general are going to do us well. I don't emphasize fruits too much because one of the problems with fruits is we have too much sugar, and we end up, one of the deficits and one of the battles I won beautifully in India with the Swamis is that, you know what, if you have hypoglycemia, you cannot have a consistent meditation. And the way I converted people to getting off their sweets and junk food was, you want to meditate for hours and hours like I do, because I used to meditate 6 hours a day in India, give up your sweets. Because if your blood sugar is going up and down, your consciousness cannot hold. And
the vritis are dancing.
Yes. And I had real success in convincing the Indian Swamis and even the American Swamis, that this works.
Yeah.
And so
they experienced the benefit.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so hypoglycemia is really a detriment. And that's really an imbalance of the chakra system. But the sugars imbalance that. Plus, they tend to stimulate candida, which sends off, funguses send off toxins, which literally deplete the neurotransmitters and actually attack the nervous system. So you don't want any of that.
Yeah.
So a green diet primarily, everybody's diet varies. Some people need a higher protein diet, some people need a lower protein diet, according to their constitution. But the green, organic, because pesticides and herbicides irritate the nervous system.
Sure.
Okay, so green, organic, grown with consciousness and love, because we take in who's growing the food too. And that's a simple thing. And no longer, in the ancient times they used milk, but milk right now has, so many pesticides and herbicides and hormones and the
steroids.
Cows are not treated very well. So what once was what we call rasu, is now ama, which is toxic. So we can't really say that that's what we call sattvic diet. So what I'm describing is a more modern sattvic diet, at least 80% live food.
Clean and pure, that is.
Yeah. A sattvic diet is one that takes you into the self rather than out into the world.
Yeah.
And at least 80% live foods, focus on the greens is the main thing, and enough protein to whatever you need for your strength and for meditation for your constitution. And those are the key things.
What about people who live in really cold climates, in northern climates? Where one, availability isn't great, and two, they're cold. I mean,
we have a live food movement going on in Alaska, and I interviewed many of the people, and 95% of them were successful.
Really?
Alaska. Why were they successful? Because they exercise and it creates heat. That's how they really work. So they can be on live foods as long as they exercise. Then they use more cayenne and ginger. It does work. You just warm and you exercise, and it works. It is really not a problem. And really, I'll tell you this, that being on live foods, you actually improve your circulation. So when I was younger, I don't think my circulation was as good. I was a football player, and I used to played animals because my feet would get so cold. And after I began doing life foods, I could go out in the snow in my bare feet. Okay, totally different experience. So I actually think after a few years, not right away, when the circulation is open, you have enough heat from your own body.
And what you're saying, I know we only have another minute or two left, but I would like to bring back in the Kabbalistic perspective, which you did reference, of course, from the point of view of the green diet. Was there the thorough understanding of its relationship to connecting to awakening?
The Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid of Mezerich, basically said that diet was very important for spiritual life. That you need to eat in a way to support your spirituality. That's as far as they really said. But actually, they said if you had disease, it was like a hole in your soul. So that they emphasized the importance of taking care of your body. They weren't really that sophisticated. You go back to Genesis 1:29, and we're back to the green diet.
I see, yeah.
So God told us, manna,
Yeah.
in the Exodus, what would they put on? You know, a light food.
Right, exactly.
And
a manna diet.
A manna diet, right. And so it's all there. And the
It's in the teaching.
And Rav Kook, okay, the first chief rabbi of Israel, was a vegetarian. They didn't have the language and technologies I've worked it out. I mean, we're way more advanced now. I mean, this is the first time in history we can be successful live fooders, successful vegans. First time in history because we have all these superfoods available. We have a way of life available, and
and access too.
Access and the technology. I mean, basically in conscious eating, in the Rainbow Green Life Food Cuisine, spiritual nutrition. I've outlined the whole path. It's like you can't fail if you just follow the consciousness that I've outlined.
Well, thank you, Toda Rabba, for your beautiful gift here, because this is very rich, very rich. It's rich food. Is that acceptable?
Yes, yes.
Thanks a lot, Gabriel.
Okay.
Very beautiful. Incredible information that can just feed every single part of you. I'm greatly, greatly appreciative of this. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
So we're throwing them off. Vegetarian diets, we ding people out.
Yeah.
So
people thought that just not eating meat was some kind of answer. They were eating fried foods, tons of dairy, etc., etc. It's not an answer.
So the message is, we now have the technology, the technical ability, as well as the background to how to be successful spiritual people and life fooders, and how, in essence, how to build the light body. So that's really one of my gifts. That I've been told to give, so to speak, from out of meditation, is how do we transform ourselves into light beings, which includes a light body.
Well, thank you, Toda Rabba, for your beautiful gift here, because this is very rich, very rich. It's rich food. Is that acceptable?
It's a,
Thanks a lot,
Yes.
Gabriel. Absolutely. Very beautiful. Incredible information that can just feed every single part of you. I'm greatly appreciative of this. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And go out to the Tree of Life Center to have a ball.
light bulb.
Cut. All right, great. Hello, and this is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us. We have invited back Dr. Gabriel Cousens to speak with us about a book that he wrote, Depression Free for Life. Gabriel Cousens is known around the world for his work with diet and nutrition as it relates to physical health, emotional health, and now one of his favorite topics and themes of his Rejuvenation Center, the Tree of Life Rejuvenation Center out in Patagonia, Arizona, is spiritual health and spiritual nutrition. Today we're going to be focusing on being depression-free. And there is a way, Gabriel says, to be depression-free for life through proper diet and, I would wager, attitude. So he'll be expanding upon this throughout this talk, this interview, and you'll get to learn some of the real nuts and bolts of the subject. Hey, Gabriel.
Hey, man. It's good to be here.
Good. You're becoming a regular around here.
It's okay.
It's good. It's good. You have a lot of experience, a lot of information that I think the public really needs to hear. I mean, the time was really yesterday, but we got some of it yesterday, but now we need it more than ever. You know, we've got to really enrich and empower people so they can stand up, be who they are, be in the light, and get a handle on this planet, you know?
Yeah.
So we can't have depressed people.
In this country, there's 40 million depressed people.
Is that as in diagnosed depressed?
Well, let's say the estimate is 40 million. We have maybe 12 million who are considered severely clinically depressed. Over half the people in the country, from ages like 18 to their late 50s, have at least one severe depression. Over half the people in their lifetime. So we have some real issues going on, and it isn't just that we're having a bad day.
Yeah, right.
We have a foundation that has created this.
Mm-hmm. So when you say depression, are you talking about biochemically based?
Well,
like,
I mean, these are clinical diagnoses, you know.
Yes.
Retarded appetite, retarded action, a sense of, you know, suicidability, boredom, lost feeling,
apathy,
apathy,
indifference.
Those are real kind of symptoms of depression. You have physical symptoms and you have mental symptoms.
Behavioral.
Yeah, no joy, no experience of, you know, loss of sexual energy, loss of any activity of really joy in your life.
Right.
So there's a series of kind of classical diagnostic things. I mentioned these in more common terms right now.
Yes.
That's what I mean by that.
Right.
Including suicidal feelings.
And including bipolar.
No, we're not including bipolar. Bipolar is an additional category.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I do work with bipolar. I've had pretty good success with that. The real issue in Depression Free for Life is I have a 5-step program, which really includes all aspects of how to reactivate and build the brain. In my book, Conscious Eating, actually, I give a whole history of how we got this way. Why are we having an epidemic of that many people? Why are we having 8 million?
It's staggering. I mean, the percentages.
Why are we having 8 million kids on Ritalin?
Yeah.
Why are we having maybe 20,000 people on Prozac or Prozac-like drugs, SSRIs? This did not happen by accident. And it's really related to poor diet in many, many ways. And there's a Price-Pottinger study done in the 30s. And they basically found when you put the cat, they did 900 cats, and when they put on basically cooked food, which to the cat is junk food, that within 3 generations, the nervous systems of the cats degenerated, their internal organ structures degenerated, they couldn't even reproduce babies.
Oh, God.
Okay, they were irritable. How do you just do a psychoanalysis on the cat? But basically, they had very irritable nervous systems. They couldn't get along. They're hostile, erratically violent, kind of like the world is today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an example of how that works. They did the same experiment with rats, and it took them 8 generations. Cats took 3 generations. Now, the humans are reaching that point. And that's
We're somewhere between cats and rats.
Yeah. Where, in a sense, we have a consistent degeneration with each generation. And so, putting it in other terms that will make sense is that we have what we call a genotype and a phenotype.
Mm-hmm.
The genotype is like your hardcore genetics. The phenotype is the expression of your genetics. And this is the key to my theory. Actually, it's not theory, my work.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the phenotypic expression is tending to get worse and worse and worse now, with a lot of literally biologically altered brains, which is a function of what we say a congenital defect,
Mm-hmm.
in a way. Because what they found is when they changed the types, they did another study. They studied 14 different cultures. What was it like when they moved on to white sugar, white flour, and so forth,
Yes.
junk food?
Mm-hmm.
And within the generation, their immune systems significantly dropped. Their bone structure significantly changed. Their nutrient dropped up from 50% to from 1/2 to 1/6 of what it was on the indigenous healthy foods. And finally, there was a great increase in congenital defects, including Down syndrome. Okay, now the context really means is that there seems to be a correlation between congenital defects, particularly in the head, such as cleft palate and so forth, with psychosis, poor social function. In the 30s, Dr. Price, so dentist, went into Cleveland Juvenile Center, and he found 90% of the kids who were juvenile delinquent had all these changes. Okay, so here's the point I'm making.
Physical changes.
Physical changes, but they relate to social changes, because
Yeah.
these kids were juvenile delinquents, okay?
Yeah.
And they had lower IQs, they had lower functioning of where they should be. So as I began to look at the research, I began to say, well, can we change this? Can we change the phenotypic expression? And the answer is yes, we can. That within 3 months to really a year, we can actually change the ability to make neurotransmitters. Now, this is really important here, because the more
Incredible.
modern research, where we're now able to study neurotransmitters in the system, is that many people are depleted. Like serotonin, the big one that people are
Yes.
concerned about,
Sure.
Prozac maybe actually ends up depleting it.
After all.
It depletes it, but it creates a false thing. I'll explain how it depletes it in a second. But the point I'm making is people under stress become depleted in their neurotransmitters and run into depression. Now, if you don't have the nutritional strength to replenish yourself, what happens? You run on empty and you get depressed. That's really what's happening. So in my work, which is
Well, you're depleting your life force.
That's
You
right.
can't build the cells that need to be built for
The neurons.
proper functioning, right?
Right.
Neurons and immune function.
So when we take something like a Prozac, what they're happening is that the normal thing is you have a neuron response. Okay, the neurotransmitter's committed, it does what it does, and then it gets reabsorbed to be recirculated to be used again. What Prozac does is it actually deletes the ability to reabsorb. And what happens? You pee it out. You
The
see what's-
serotonin?
Yeah, because it's not being reabsorbed.
Yeah,
So it's up
yeah.
higher in the neurosynapse, and then it's lost.
Yeah.
So that's why we have the phenomenon called Prozac poop out.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
actually causes the norepinephrine to be depleted too, and also the dopamine. And now they've studied in hyperactive kids, they find that they have a high depletion rate of dopamine and norepinephrine. Okay, and so this is all part of what goes on. And what are some of the
These are the
things
basic neurotransmitters.
Yeah,
I mean,
these are
the fundamental
basic,
ones.
fundamental ones. There's maybe 50 neurotransmitters. Okay, and so what we're seeing is like a high glycemic diet, which is a high sugar diet,
Refined carbohydrates.
tends to deplete the serotonin, the dopamine, and norepinephrine. And you look at all these children with hyperactivity, and you see what's going on. They're having a high sweet diet. They did a research experiment in the New York City system, a brilliant experiment. It was 1986, Dr. Stephen Schoenthal. All they did was took the sugar out of 803 schools. So all they got basically the equivalent is fruit sugar, all the junk food, the sweets and the
High
soft
refined.
drinks and stuff. And there was a drop, 74,000 kids stopped becoming hyperactive. The English and math scores went skyrocketing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we have the potential, that was a 1.1 million children, by simply changing our diet in the most gross way to eliminate a lot of these problems rather than giving people Ritalin, which actually further depletes the system like the Prozacs do, the SSRIs do. And this is the problem. So my work is healing the biologically altered brain. And how do I do it? I build up the neurotransmitter systems with precursors, amino acid precursors. We analyze it, we figure it out, and then we use these precursors. Sometimes in 2 weeks, but it can take up to a year. Okay, usually I get results within 3 months. Okay. Second thing I do,
So that means people are taking amino acids, or you say precursors?
Well, like tryptophan,
Okay.
5-hydroxytryptophan, D-L-phenylalanine, which is a precursor to dopamine.
Okay.
Tyrosine, precursor to
So
dopamine.
basically taking amino acids in a particular combination and dosage per the individual.
Right. GABA-aminobutyric acid, which is often depleted in this, it's like a suppressor one. We are given biologically serotonin as a neuroprotective network. Okay. It is depleted by lack of sleep, by anxiety, by not getting enough negative ions, by not getting enough light, by not getting enough exercise. These are kind of basics.
Yep.
And how do people live in the world?
Yeah.
What am I? I'm telling you
exactly
what's going on here.
Yep.
And by poor nutrition, because a high tryptophan diet, okay, is going to build that up. You see.
Yes.
So we're depleting it, we're not building it up, and then we're taking drugs that further deplete it because we don't reabsorb it. We end up peeing it out.
And tryptophan was taken off the market and deemed illegal.
But it is actually legal.
Now it is.
You see, it was so effective that it was a competition for the pharmaceuticals. They got on a bogus thing, like there was a bacterial contamination.
Yep. Take it off the shelves.
Right. So you can't get it in the health food store now, but you can order it through compound pharmacies.
Oh, okay.
So I use it with my clients a fair amount, and I personally think it's better than 5-hydroxytryptophan, which is available in health food stores. But they're both good. Tryptophan deals more with anxiety and more with insomnia.
Sleep, rest, right.
Yeah. And in Boston, Dr. Hartman did some of the original research with tryptophan when I was a psychiatry resident. So I was like tuned into it
to the beginning.
That was
Beautiful.
in the 1970.
Wow.
So
yeah,
so I know this
that
works.
was early. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the point I'm making is that that's level 1. The level 2 is my goal is how do we activate the functioning of the neurons? Often people are deficient in B vitamins, and B6 you need to convert tryptophan to serotonin. Okay, you need B3 for all that functioning. You need vitamin E. Vitamin E a vitamin E deficiency will actually cause a breakdown of the serotonin neurons. So that's how important vitamin E is. We're also seeing it's very important in Alzheimer's and preventing Alzheimer's. But vitamin E has a very important thing. You need magnesium. There's a whole range of minerals without going into all the details. So we need to build up the actual functioning of the neuron and brain system. And often, because of the fat scare, people are deficient in omega-3 fatty acids.
Sure.
That's level 3 now. So I build up the omega-3. Now what we know, this is not my research, but research that's been done in the U.S., that the long-chain omega-3s, particularly EPA, is extremely important in treating manic depression. It seems to be important in depression in general, but that seems to help tremendously, and I take a variety of people off their manic depressive drugs, and they're stable. I mean, they're stable because what it does is it builds you need the omega-3s to have the right structure in your neurons. Okay? The omega-3s also build the neurotransmitter receptor sites and also neurotransmitters. Let me tell you how complex it is. There's over 12 different serotonin receptor sites. And so when you...
In the brain or in the nervous system?
In the nervous system, because serotonin is also in the gut, too. But what I also want to say is, what is serotonin deficiency? The serotonin nervous system creates a pulse, a calming, steady pulse. Okay? So the pulse can be altered. The amount of neurotransmitter that's actually made that comes into the synapse can be altered. How much stays in that synapse? The amount of serotonin receptor sites can be altered, which is more than omega-3, and also the total amount of serotonin in the system. So it's way more complex than let's just jack up the serotonin, and in the end, you're paying it out, and you call it a deficiency.
If that pulse is thrown off that you're referring to, that means the entire rhythm, the circadian rhythms of the body in relationship to everything else is also thrown off.
Yes.
And that same pulsing is related to the heart pulsing, and it's also related to the rocking effect of being an infant. And why is that important? It's just because of that pulsing and the importance, the universal importance of that pulsing.
So this is how the serotonin system works. It's much more
Does that all make
complex.
sense with
Yes.
your understanding?
And I'll just say something else. Repetitive movement, like rocking, also has been shown to build serotonin. Okay.
There we go.
It's really fascinating to understand. And the beauty, of course, is you can rebuild the system. Now, another piece, level 4, is the pH. And there's been work done in the 50s.
Of the blood and tissue?
Of the blood, the venous blood. It has to be around 7.46. If you're too alkaline or too acid, you get stupor, paranoia, anxiety, even schizophrenia. And when you bring it back to its optimal pH for functioning, because everything in the body functions at an optimal pH, many of these symptoms ameliorate. So we do work to bring that overall body system back, the blood to 7.46. That's level 4. And level 5 is lifestyle. And this is the positive thinking, the joy, the spirituality, the meditation. And these all work.
The attitude.
They've really been proven to work.
Yes.
Okay.
Utterly, completely, biochemically.
Right. And so, and also the live food diet or a vegan diet. I'll give you one example of that. The Russians did some research with incurable schizophrenics. 65% of them became normal when they were put on a long water fast. They only relapse when they start eating meat again, because their biochemistry became distorted with the meat in terms of, and it began to produce toxins that altered the brain. So that's the 5 levels, and we're talking 90% success rate if people follow the program. Not only for depression, drug addiction. The same thing. What are the drug addictions from? People aren't getting pleasure in their life. Their neurotransmitters are depleted, so they go to drugs to do that. Hypoglycemia is another thing that needs to be taken care of. So these are all get taken care of.
Smoking also?
Oh, yes. Same thing. They're all from the depletion, and then you're trying to get pleasure. And this is all about pleasure. Rebuilding the brain, the biologically altered brain, is about reestablishing the pleasure principles in the body. It's also about alcoholism, too. There's another center that used just the vitamin and neurotransmitter aspect, level 1 and 2 of my program, and their results were at 1 year like 92% versus 75% for just like an AA, and at 4 years their results were 75% success versus 7.5%. So it's about a 10 time better. It also includes cocaine. They'll tell you you can't heal from cocaine. That just simply isn't true. I have cocaine addicts. We're done with cocaine. We rebuild the neurological system in what we call the pituitary adrenal axis.
Axis, right?
Yeah. And when you rebuild that and bring that back into harmony, it really begins to work. So these are things that really can be done to seriously rebuild the brain and let people be filled with joy. And then you have to maintain the lifestyle. Meditating makes a difference. Eating right makes a difference. Living in harmony makes a difference. So the exciting thing to me is that we simply can take people off these the drugs people are further biologically or alter the brain. We can reverse that process, whether it takes 2 weeks, where I've seen that happen, or more than that. Now I've discovered some other things. I use a machine called a Papimi, which I had a 18-year-old boy, 17-year-old boy from the Midwest who was having intense hallucinations. One treatment stopped his hallucinations. It was quite a surprise.
And they didn't come back?
Well, they started to come back, and now he gets a treatment once a week where he is. They found a machine.
I see, yeah.
And he's following the program, and he's like enjoying life, and he's
Beautiful.
healing. What I'm saying is there's more to it. Is that once we can stimulate the neurotransmitter systems, a lot of these things like hallucinations, which are very serious problems.
Oh, yeah.
And when you take people off medication and you stop their hallucinations, and they start to be like full human beings again, and they're now, an A student again.
Yeah.
We're making...
They're back to life.
This is powerful.
You bet. You bet.
And
the Papimi is supercharging, magnetically supercharging their cells.
Yeah.
So, and clearing.
And activating the neurotransmitter system. In other words, you've moved from a lower phenotypic expression to a higher phenotypic expression where you're operating at a healed biological brain rather than a distorted, wounded one.
Sure.
Our present system just actually wounds the brain more.
Yeah.
And that's
Definitely.
why people have to switch medications, have to go more medications and more of a zombie, and then ultimately it doesn't work because they become so depleted.
Well, nobody's ever had a Prozac deficiency. They've had vitamin A, C, D, and E, but not Prozac. So the results that you have gotten, Gabriel, have been rather consistent with these kinds of depression, because so many
and the regular depression
seem so intractable.
that like so many people in New York have
is
definitely, we're talking 90% success rate.
Wow.
And I have found, and there's another factor, and I don't want to put it all in the tree of life, but I know if people stay for 3 weeks, all the forces of nature plus the life and diet and everything we're doing, I expect, and I'm going to be at least 95% of those people within 3 weeks to be done with their depression. I mean, I just expect that as a normal. Okay?
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying.
That's fabulous.
Because when you can link people with nature, it speeds the process up. I mean, I've had people, from England have come and, they couldn't even function, had to leave their jobs and this and that.
Yeah.
They come, let them be there for a month or two. You deal with the chronic fatigue, you build up their biological, and that's it. They're done with depression.
It's a major recharge being out there.
Yeah.
It's a true revitalization of the organs and the spirit.
Right. I mean, people can come for a few days and get the workup, and it works. But what I'm saying is, you stay for 3 weeks, and you go through this program, and 95% of the people are going to never see depression again in their life.
It's incredible.
So it's very exciting.
Now,
it's a basic principle, though.
Yeah.
Improve the phenotypic expression by those 5 steps on all those levels.
And so, for people who are not able to get there, or at least at this time, and are wherever they are suffering,
Right.
I mean, fundamentally, by shifting to, this is predicated on a live food and largely green diet.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, and the Depression Free for Life book outlines the 5 steps and what to do with the neurotransmitters.
Great. And so, but it does require the elimination of the ordinary
Absolutely.
fast food, junk
Because
food syndrome, replacing it with the live green.
Exactly. I mean, let's be dramatic for a second.
I just want people to really know that that is a fundamental building block of the new neurotransmitter system that's required to have a normal life.
And I'm going to give you an example the other way.
Yeah.
The genetically engineered foods. Dr. Puzak in England and Scotland. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. Never quite. It's some kind of Scottish name.
Probably.
He
Gaelic.
basically gave genetically engineered food to rats, and within 10 days, they saw brain shrinkage, heart shrinkage, and liver shrinkage, and also diminished function in the internal organs. 10 days.
Oh my
so
God.
We're eating genetically engineered food in this country. It's going to unlabeled and undetected. In fact, the only way you can be safe is to eat organic and eat your own food, because the pesticides and herbicides further act as neurotoxins on the brain function. So it isn't just live food; it's organic food. I want to stress that.
Yes.
And certainly not genetically engineered food. And he lost his job for that.
Very good point.
He lost his job, but the whole European community got behind him, scientific community. He got his job back because his research was so solid that even the corporate interests could not overrule that. That was beautiful.
Oh, that's fabulous.
So the good news is we can change our phenotypic expression. We can live, eat, and function in a way where we no longer have to be depressed. More than that, that's a negative way of talking about it. More than that, we can begin to enjoy our birthright, which is pleasure, and begin to experience the light in our lives. That was truly who we are.
Beautiful. That's I'm convinced. It's true, but this is what happens when you're in the face of truth. You just start to glow in another way. Really, it's beautiful work you're doing, Gabriel. It really is, and you're helping so many people through this education that you're giving, and what you're doing at the Tree of Life is incredible. I mean, I know because I was there, and I'm coming back soon too. We're going to continue more interviews. Anyway, I just want to thank you again for this work you're doing. Absolutely.
And thank you for the work you're doing. This is really good to get this information out.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Beautiful. Great.
Good morning, this is Gibson Lopez with the First Voices Indigenous Radio, and special today, all day, which is Indigenous Peoples Day, and not that guy who is lost, as you call Columbus, and all these who are celebrating that day. This program this morning and programming thereafter until 1 o'clock will be about different thinking, different history, which is the real history of this land and this Western Hemisphere. And with that, we are going to be speaking with several different people. I would kind of like to do a timeline as we go along this morning. And as you know, Columbus was discovered by Native people on offshore. And offshore is here not only for Turtle Island, but the rest of the islands in the Western Hemisphere, and mainly in the Caribbean, where Columbus landed, and in the hopes of finding gold and resources and new routes to India. And with that, what I would like to do is welcome some Taino brothers from the United Confederation of Taino People, Roger Hernandez and Roberto Guerrero Lucaro, who used to be here at the Circle of Nations on Monday nights, I believe it was. And he's been, working diligently with the UN and several other organizations out to bring the same awareness he was doing here on I believe it was Circle of Nations. Is that right, Robert? And with that, I'd like to bring these two brothers on, and I'd just like to give them the microphone, because this is about, Columbus and our